Are there no rules in Russia-Ukraine war? In any war, attacking military camps and bases is fair game. The only rules are don't attack civilian population centers. Don't use biological warfare, gas, viruses and so on. And don't use nukes. OBVS. As harsh as attacking a sleeping soldier is, it is a tactic used throughout the history you attack when your enemy is most vulnerable. Night raids were a favored tactic. If someone's getting blown up while in an invasion, I don't know if the state of their consciousness matters much. They're dead either way. Since WW2, most countries have made agreements to only target military targets and not hit civilian populations just to kill people. This does hit a lot of gray areas when military positions themselves inside civilian populations, but normally a responsible nation will gather enough evidence the military targets are there and try to only limit the destruction to the target. Dropping munitions on soldiers, military targets, raining missiles in a city center as retaliation for a bridge being dropped. Unclear if it was done by military, with no evidence that any military targets were actually hit as a war crime. Rule number 1 of warfare: don't sleep on your enemy's porch. Rules are only followed if it's likely to get a bigger army sent against you. So worldwide, the attacking of civilians and use of scorched earth weaponry would get that, so that's a rule. The idea is to take over the country with as many resources as possible, so murder the defenders and keep the workers. There are laws of war that most countries have agreed to through a set of UN charters and international treaties, most famous of this being the Geneva Conventions. You're generally not allowed to attack non-combatants, especially civilians, retreating combatants, or wounded combatants and medical personnel. You can attack a functional enemy as long as they're not actively retreating away from you or trying to signal surrender. So yes, you can attack while your enemy soldiers are sleeping. In fact, this is very much how shock and awe campaigns work, and one of the reasons why the US was able to rush into Iraq and cover ground quite fast initially to Baghdad in 2003, and also was able to repel Saddam Hussein's army from Kuwait so quickly in 1991. We bombed Iraqi air defense and critical strategic points at night while they were less likely to be awake and alert, or at full capacity, and so that our stealth airplanes could also fly under cover of night. I think it seems shocking because with the advent of easily accessible cheap drones coupled with smartphones that can take much better pictures than we used to, and the ability to share that footage inside combat zones super easy, we're seeing more first-hand and unfiltered how ugly war can be. War ethics, LMAO. Who is gonna tell em? If you're a combatant, you're fair game in war. The idea is you are willing to kill another person, so be prepared to be killed. Killing non-combatants, like medics who have not begun to fight back, civilians, chaplains, is a war crime. Killing someone who is involved in fighting but just happens to be asleep at the time is not. War is not humane. You need to remember that although these Russian soldiers are sleeping, they are sleeping illegally in Ukraine, after having shot and killed Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. It's not nice to watch a human helplessly die, but they had a choice, just as the 700,000 who have fled Russia to avoid this scenario. War is horrifying, best not to watch, and just support Ukraine in aid, and trust they will prevail. There have never been more than gentlemen's rules in war. As long as you don't lose by capitulating, there is no one to prosecute you. It can also depend on the war. Wars between civil nations tend to follow the international rules of wars mostly because those wars are political with minimal actual malice. With sectarian or ethnic sides or between certain countries with a history of animosity. Those wars can be sometimes conducted by pure hatred of the other side. Some of those hatreds can be centuries old. Civil wars are usually the worst type of war. Animosity and hatred are normally high. Large numbers of participants may, technically, be civilian. International rules are by agreement. There is no way to enforce them other than the threat of sanctions or more war. Any country willing to sanction Russia for war crimes is already sanctioning Russia for the war. And Ukraine is backed by the West, and they will prevent any prosecutions. War rules? As evidenced by Russia targeting civilians and torturing civilians and soldiers. Not compared to what Russia is doing. They bomb sleeping civilians. Also do a whole lot more. There's only what you can do and the consequences. Nothing is truly out of question when a leader's back is against the wall. But obvs no one's dropping nukes willy-nilly. The Russians have been targeting civilians since day one. They attacked a country that did nothing to them. They are killing innocent civilians en masse. They are using rape of not only women, but children as punishment. They are torturing civilians by the thousands. They evacuated thousands of Ukrainians to kill them in Russia to hide the bodies. The forcing Armenian to join the Russian military. So Russians don't die. And they can eliminate the Armenians. They are threatening nuclear war if they lose in Ukraine. Okay, tell me again why we shouldn't kill sleeping Russian soldiers? Yeah, the rule is don't get caught sleeping. You can feel bad for them. Most of them were manipulated by propaganda to be there. And if you were born in Russia, there is fair chance you would be there too. But they are still invaders. They need to be pushed out or killed by any means necessary. That's just sad truth. I have zero knowledge of war ethics. It's war. People tend to not put that much stock into ethics, or what's considered right or wrong during wars. There are conventions that exist, but they're more of just a formality. Russia firebombs whole cities. I bet there was someone sleeping there. But those were civilians. Innocent women and children. Burned alive. That guy sleeping in the trench was aiding that effort. Their death saved innocent lives. So no rules.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. FlakyClue is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.